Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching us. This is the fourth interview we have as Tech Visionary Interviews. And this time we have Ståle Hansen, all the way from Norway, joined us. He's a Microsoft Regional Director and MVP on Office Apps and Services. His area of specialty is actually working with like digital transformation, online meetings and teams and areas around that, of course, these days. Hey, Ståle, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, great, thanks. Talking about digital transformation, which is kind of like somehow related to the topic today, which we have like new digital meeting space in corporate environment. Can you, before we talk about that, introduce yourself?
Yes. So my name is Ståle Hansen, and I run a company called Cloudway, which is based in a couple of countries: Norway, Sweden, Ireland, and the USA. And we are actually 7 people and all our MVPs. So we work with Microsoft 365 secure productivity, which means we don't only do the productivity stuff, we also do a lot around security, identity, device management. So we're trying to look at the whole story around working in a digital way. I've been an MVP for almost 10 years, and I've been a regional director for some time. And I have been sharing my thoughts on like the productivity. I'm a productivity enthusiast on my YouTube channel.
Great, thank you. So based on what you explained about your industry experience, you should see a lot of companies these days, especially they are like all moving to like digital transformation. We had like the concept of like let's move to let's do digital transformation. Let's bring our workspaces and make it digital. Let's have like online meetings and things like that. That was like a topic to discuss for a lot of time, but nothing happened until COVID-19, and suddenly a lot of businesses, without even having like the any planning about that, they just jumped into this area. What do you see as like side effects of that, or how this happened, do you think?
Yeah, so I think there's a popular meme going around where the question is who drove your digital adoption? And the answer is COVID-19, not the CFO, not the CEO, not the HR department, but it was COVID-19. And that's definitely what we're seeing. Digital ways of collaborating is nothing new. It's been in most of the organization for a long time, but now we have so many new user types being forced to change how they do meetings. And it's stated that it takes over 21 days to have new habits form. And now we have had situations where people have been working from home for 1 month, 2 months, and that changes how you need to do stuff, and it creates new habits, and the new habits are to run meetings virtually, use the technology. And we've heard from people that haven't used this much of digital technology that, hey, this actually works. I actually get to have meetings with my peers, and I get to have meetings with my employees, and I'm able to have more effective meetings. I don't need to travel between meetings, and we can have different types of meetings.
Yeah, and like what are the features of such a meeting? Like, do we get like notes and things like that alongside with our meeting? What are things that you think are the most important features beside it?
Well, if you look at the Microsoft platform, which is my main focus area, there is definitely a push to work smarter, not harder. Not just have, okay, let's have 100 meetings, because meetings are great, and they are easy to have. But it's more interesting to look at why are we having meetings, what are we doing in those meetings, and how could we have moved some of the discussions to other platforms. So if you look at Microsoft, for instance, you have Microsoft Teams, where you have chat, you have communication, you have collaboration, where you can work on the same documents. And what we have seen is when you are managed to move your conversations and your processes over to channels and teams, then we see that a lot of the communication you have there was communications you recapped on or did in meetings because you needed to form like the whole group or the department or something like that. But now we see that you actually have those conversations indirectly in Teams, so you can indirectly get informed about it, and you can also pick up loose threads after the meetings in those platforms. So the goal moving forward would be to have shorter meetings, more to the point meetings, and maybe not a pickup meeting to pick up the meeting you had before the meeting you're gonna have about the meetings you will have in the future. So it's more about like being more to the point around that and use the tools available to do that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for explaining that. Considering these features that you talked about, like raising hands, like having meeting notes and things like that, what do you think are like the main functions or the main features or factors, whatever you might call it, of the digital meeting these days? How we can kind of replace what we had in like in-person meetings now with digital meetings?
Yeah, so you can never replace in place meetings, but there's so many meeting types that you can do virtual. I think all hands meetings can be done really great virtual. Status meetings, departmental meetings, and follow up meetings and all that. And those kind of features like raise hands is a way for people to be able to speak up in those meetings and to have those tools available. What we also will see in the future of Teams is breakout rooms, so that you can actually have one main meeting and then break out in different meetings. So those are like the features you can get in order to do those meetings. So what we will see though, what's important moving forward when we're getting more and more back to the office is that we need to look into more inclusive meetings. And with inclusive meetings, I mean that you should expect that people will plan to attend remote, will plan to attend where they are. And I believe that people are seeing like, oh, do I really need to travel in order to do that 1 hour meeting? Or do I value my time more so that I would think I can do this meeting from where I'm at the customer site. Maybe I was traveling. Maybe I just was thinking I could do this from home. And we'll see more and more of that moving forward as well. So the main challenge then is to make sure your meeting spaces are prepared for the digital meetings, making sure that it's a first-rate experience to join a meeting, even though it's in the office. I think that's something you need to think about moving forward.
Great, thanks. Now, considering like these different tools, we have a lot of like tools and services for like online meeting. There is Microsoft Teams, there is Zoom, Google Hangouts, even Skype and things like that. Some of them free, some of them like paid services. A lot of like decision makers, like companies director, they think which one to choose. Should they go for free? Should they go for paid? Like, how do you gauge like the difference between these? Of course this would require like its own kind of sessions, but like a summary.
Yeah, so it really depends, right? It depends on your tech setup today, what kind of tools you're using today. I think the most important thing is to find the meeting tool that integrates best with your workflow as a team or as a person. So a free tool versus a paid tool, I don't think that matters as long as it covers your need and that you get to meet with those you meet with. So if you meet with a lot of consumers, for instance, it makes sense to do it via Skype or via tools that are available for consumers. But if you're looking for more integrated tools into typically Office 365 or security or compliance, then you need to look at those tools and look at the like 360 degrees for those tools in terms of how they can handle your demands. I'm thinking about identity security. I'm thinking about encryption of the service. Typically, free services, there is a trade-off, right? Because you give away something, you give away your data, you give away your usage of the service to the provider. and they are maybe free to sell it forward. But when you have a paid service, it's more your service, and it goes straight to the service provider providing that service. And you have the ability to both integrate with your existing tools, make sure you have two-factor authentication, single sign-on with your log on, and so on and so forth. What's important as well when you're looking for a digital tool is to make sure it works on multiple platforms and the platforms you are using, so that you are not locking into a specific operating system or a client type, but it's available across multiple platforms, so you have the freedom to choose.
Perfect, thank you. You mentioned also like having tools and kind of like environment setup. So for having like digital meetings, or like let's say digital workspace, it's not just about like the software. It's also about some tools and things around it, like gadgets that we also need. What sort of things you've seen used most often?
Well, the major challenge these days is that people got sent home with work from home environments, and they need to use their consumer headsets, for instance, to attend those meetings. They use their iPhone buds, they use whatever they had lying around, built-in speakers and all that. And that typically works great if you are in a silent room, there is no bad acoustic, and you are alone, there is no one home that makes a sound, because those consumer devices, especially on the headset side, they tend to amplify the room around you and pick up everything for you. And also, if you're looking for Teams, for instance, there are specific certification programs that certify devices for being used in Teams meetings. And what you find there is that they have support for the wideband audio codec. They have noise canceling typically on the microphone, so they remove the sound around you instead of amplifying it. The buttons work, so if you mute yourself in a headset, you're muted in the meeting. So it's a more integrated experience. And the moment you go and use a consumer device for audio, especially in Teams, you automatically downgrade your quality. Just test it with if you have a certified device for Skype for Business or Teams, contra a consumer device like iPhone buds or even Bose headsets that are consumer devices. So there's a big difference there. And I think that is important. And of course, you need to think about lighting. You need to think about where you're at. And that's the cool thing, right, with the Teams, that you got the ability to have your custom background or blur your background. And also think about the room you're in. What kind of acoustics do you have? Do you want to use a headset like this? Or do you want to use a speaker device? And so on and so forth. So that's important to think about as well.
Thank you. That's a great advice because sometimes like these hardware devices like microphone headsets and things like that, lighting especially, they play really important role, even if you got like really powerful software behind the scenes. Still with like low quality devices, it might not work that great. Now talking about like making everything digital, how do you think this would work for like training sessions? Because previously we used to do like training session in a classroom style lecture, like drawing something on a sketch on a whiteboard, explaining things. Now with everything going digital, how do you think that would work out?
Well, of course, you can never replace a good classroom training, but you can find the next big thing, which is doing it virtual. And you have a lot of tools available. You have a whiteboard from Microsoft, for instance, when you can do whiteboarding, which works across all the different applications. But you also need to think about the way to teach as well. If you do that, to look into the camera when talking instead of like looking over there, because like the camera is over here and I'm talking to you there, stuff like that. So that's important, but also make sure that the tools you teach in terms of the way you deliver the content. If it's a PowerPoint, if you're used to doing video and drawing and all that, make sure it translates well into the digital tool as well. We at Cloudway, we actually ran a lot of workshops digitally when we couldn't meet our customers on site, and we have gotten some really, really good feedback on that. Being structured so that we run the meeting within Teams and Teams channels, and so people can discuss, they can give feedback. It's a two-way thing, and that's something you need to think about as well. How do you handle the feedback from the users? Do you encourage them to speak up? Do you encourage them to ask the questions in Teams? Do you take the questions during the call, and so on and so forth? So practicing like good way to do digital meetings is important.
Great, thanks. I would also think of like this new wave of like everything digital would require a new set of skills. Let's say if I'm running a company, if I have a team of, let's say, developers or in-house resources who are taking care of like my whole IT infrastructure, now I should also have them like upskilled in teams or technologies like that. Is this like a new set of area, skill set, or even a job, like a position that you think of growing?
Yes, I think it goes both ways, because tips and tricks in the tool to use the tool and get started with it is easy. Succeeding with it on an organizational level, that's hard. And what we see now is that people are starting to use digital workplaces. They're starting to use Yammer and Teams and maybe Slack even more, and so on and so forth. But now you need to teach them culture, chat culture, notification culture. How do we collaborate within the workspace? How do we chat? Where do we chat? How many teams should we create, or should we create channels instead? And think about that. So what we see is that now is the need for looking at the culture, not the tips and tricks, because I think a lot of people are mastering that really well. But now it's more about, okay, how do we actually collaborate within this? And I've seen two challenges in this, and that's meeting fatigue, like virtual meeting fatigue, that you have back to back to back to back to back to back meetings all day, because now you're meeting all day, and people get exhausted. They talk to each other all the time. There's no space between the meetings where you go to the water cooler, meet someone else, or there is no time for, like, you need to actually travel to a place or go to a different floor in the building or something like that, which helps you clear your mind. Now it's like, oh, I'm always 5 minutes late to my meeting. And the other thing we see is notification fatigue, is that you get too many notifications because you're not thinking about how can I protect myself from notifications about nothing really, or notifications about conversation that I really don't care about. So teaching users those kind of things, I guess, is more important moving forward. For instance, in Outlook, you can actually go and set a setting to end your meetings 10 minutes before the actual full hour if you do a 1 hour meeting. So all 1 hour meetings, for instance, become 50-minute meetings, so that you actually get some lead time between meetings to get a coffee or get some water or go to the restroom or just stretch your legs. So I think that's now the challenge, that people need to be more conscious about their time. And there are a lot of tools available to do that, to find those focus times during busy meeting days as well.
Great, thanks. Great list of things to do, definitely, and especially the culture you mentioned is really important. Which is bringing us back to the first thing we've talked about. Like now after COVID, like everyone like jumped into the digital workspace space. Now things are getting slowly, gradually back to normal. How do you think this would be like afterwards when things are going to be back in the office?
Yeah, no one knows. right? Because it's the new normal. What's the new normal? We don't know, right? So everything we did before COVID may not happen after COVID. We are going to be more digital, but what does that mean? What will the expectations be? Will we travel less? How will we treat business trips moving forward? And I believe that you will still travel, you will still do business trips, but I do believe that you will be more conscious about your time. You won't travel to do a 1 hour meeting anymore. It makes no sense. Why should I spend 2 hours going to a 1 hour meeting, or maybe I spend 3 hours actually to go to 1 hour meeting? Sometimes it makes sense because like it's the first introduction, but other times it's just a waste of time because we just could have talked about this in over Teams. And also, what people may do more as well is have primary meetings over digital meetings instead, and then get like a more productive meeting when they first actually meet, and maybe have those longer meetings so everyone gets something out of those meetings. I would think would happen more. But what's the new normal that everyone is talking about? We don't actually know about that, how that will change. But what we do know is that we have jumped 5 to 10 years into the future in terms of adopting this, and the request from the users and demand from users to have these services work really good when we get back, that there are no network glitches. And remember that we have been running all these meetings, and it's been like an exponential growth on how we run these meetings, and how many meetings we run as well. And all those meetings may return to the office. And have you planned for that? Have you planned for the network, the internet breakout, if you're running an online service? And we've seen a lot of companies that have on-premises meeting services that they have like split that out of VPN. So now they run that via the cloud, or run it outside the VPN. So if it was a new service for you, or you weren't actually using it the same way, you should really think about the quality when you get back. It's not magical. It's not the same as when everyone has their own personal internet breakout. If you have like one centralized breakout, then you're going to do digital meetings.
Great,
So,
thanks. Yep.
yeah.
Go on, please.
No, and I believe we will actually change how we travel. I think that's the key takeaway on that, and be more conscious about our own personal time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard stories even right now, like in New Zealand, things are opened up almost right now because our number of cases went down. And I've seen stories that like there was companies that they had like an office before. A lot of things happened in person now after COVID-19, after moving like to the digital world. They realized that they can't do things digital, so they went fully digital. Some of them went like hybrid. They do some part of it in person, like for example, not for like an hour meeting as you mentioned. They go to office. They do that like over Teams and things like that. But they use some in-person time as well, which is fantastic. Thank you for your time. Do you have anything else at the end to mention that I haven't talked about?
No, I think it's important that everyone remember that home office is something that will happen more in the future, even though you are getting back to the office. So having a good place to work at home, I think is really important, like a dedicated place, have a comfy office chair at home. I think more and more people will realize that it's equally important that you have a place to sit at home, and not just at the kitchen table with a wooden chair, because then it gets really tiresome. And also, I think having the correct devices, using certified headsets even more is important, because it's hard to listen to people with poor sound in longer meeting. It's straining. It's difficult to listen, and it may actually result in poorer performing meetings, because you get tired of having those dialogues and just like, okay, let's move on, instead of like having those in-depth discussions if it's hard to listen to what people are saying. So think about that moving forward, and make sure as a company that you're thinking about how can you help your employees get better environments at home as well, the correct type of furniture to make sure they can do this in the correct way, and have the correct type of devices. I would think we need to think more about moving forward, because it is not a new thing to work from home and have remote solutions. It's just that now that everyone has been forced to try it, there is a higher expectation that you should be able to do that.
Fantastic list of advice for sure. How our audience can reach out to you if they have any questions or things like that? Is this like the description we put under your video feed, like YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn? What is the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, so Twitter, if you have a question, LinkedIn, if you want to connect, and YouTube, if you want to learn my productivity life hacks.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for your time again. And thank you everyone for watching this. See you on the next video.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.